Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca. It is once again time for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey catch-up and chit-chat. So diving right into the books for this week that I touched, I got to The Archipelago of Hope, Wisdom and Resilience from the Edge of Climate Change by Gleb Raygorodetsky. This is obviously nonfiction, and this is my library treasure hunt selection for this week. Not this week, for this month in April, and I will do a standalone review of this, so I'm not going to talk too much about it here, but this generally jumps through several indigenous peoples and their heritage and ancestral practices in working with the environment in ways that are very beneficial and sustainable, things that obviously we need to adapt to for dealing with climate change. And I think that many of these things have not been treated with respect in the past, and now we are really learning scientifically the benefits of those practices. So I did very much enjoy this one. Then I have one I did not really like, unfortunately, and that is a heartbreaking work of staggering genius by Dave Eggers, which is ostensibly his memoir, and it's very long and rambling. It's over 500 pages, and I'm a little baffled about this one, though I kind of shouldn't be, I guess. So in the aspect that it's very rambling, it's pretty stream of consciousness, how it's written. It also swings really wildly from very extreme grandiosity to self-doubt. And it's really like solipsistic and navel-gazy, which just I didn't buy into at any point. But he's a compelling storyteller, and that's something I've experienced with one of his works before, The Monk of Mocha, and I'm not sure it totally worked for me here because of how like self-absorbed it comes across in this book, since it is his memoir. So it's hard to judge this though, because he is being so raw and sharing all of this really kind of intimate and traumatic information right out of the gate. We're talking through his experience in pretty graphic detail of his parents both dying of cancer. Really long, slow process with his mom specifically is at the start of the book. And so that just sort of hits you right away out of the gate. But as we're going along, it's more and more and more of that as a result of his parents dying. Most of the book after that point is him talking about raising his younger brother, who's much younger than him, as a person in his young 20s, still kind of finding himself as a young adult and being very, very focused on wanting to still do those fun things and like hook up with people and not having that freedom or trying to pursue that freedom while also really caring about his brother and feeling like he's constantly doing everything wrong. And so those aspects were kind of relatable, but it was so over the top. This felt very much like manic phases and anxiety spiraling just continuously. So it's a really tense and claustrophobic book to read because you're just completely in his head for these non sequitur rambles about everything he's concerned with when he goes out at night to have fun while realizing his brother is at home and like all the things that could be going wrong. And he is just spiraling around these horrific things that he thinks of, while jumping in with what's actually going on and him trying to pursue a woman and wanting to hook up with her and like all of that. And so there is that juxtaposition that could be interesting. I think for me though, it's interesting how transactional this comes across, because this sort of is meta in it's getting across that he's putting out all this raw stuff, but he is doing it for status, and he knows that. He knows that he's making a transaction of we're going to really buy into this. And that plays out quite a bit in the middle of the book. He's actually trying out for The Real World, the MTV show, the reality show, and is in a very long section just trauma dumping and giving all of these really questionable anecdotes to the interviewer to get in. And that kind of just kept going on and on and on to the point I forgot he was even still in the interview and thought we were just getting stories from his life, but we were still in the interview. And he's just telling these really extreme stories, both trauma, some things that are like childhood racism, just exposing himself completely. And then at the end, it's kind of like, okay, well, I've given you all of this in trade for you putting me on the show, and then I can promote this magazine that I'm working for. That's how this works, right? And so you never feel that real emotional connection from him to all of this really horrific stuff that he's recounting. It always feels like he realizes internally that, yeah, this stuff is important and it has value in how rare and unusual and extreme it is. But that's all about attention for him. It's all about drawing others to him rather than connecting emotionally. And that just felt kind of gross, just in general. Yeah, so this, for me, I don't know where I would place this in terms of writing. I feel like the writing is good, though I've never read David Foster Wallace. I would imagine this is every impression that I've gotten of what probably David Foster Wallace writes like. I don't know. But it is that, it feels like. It feels very like white man who has had trauma but doesn't process it in a really healthy way at all. And the perspectives outside of himself about other people, like as actual human beings, is not very healthy. He constantly is getting into these relationships with people that are about him improving his status. And I don't feel like in the end there was ever any real reflection or processing of anything that went on. And that was really my main problem with this, I think. So I felt the writing was pretty strong. Stylistically, it's not really a style that I love. But I think it was well written. I think he is a very compelling storyteller. Absolutely was gripped through the stories, and that was why I finished it. But I just kind of didn't like anything about the actual book. So this was a definite dud, and I'm glad I finished it. I think it's important to read from perspectives that help you understand someone who thinks extremely different than you do, and that was true here for sure. And I think the fact that it was well written is what kept me going. Definitely I would not have finished this if it were less well written. But I'm glad to be done with it and to have a chunky book off of my shelves. So it's not taking up space on my nonfiction shelf anymore. So those are the two that I finished this week. And I did make progress on Middlemarch. It doesn't really look like I did, but I read almost 100 pages in that. I continued on with the Irish RM. We're making some good progress in this one, but I'm still not really loving it. And I also started A Sorceress Comes to Call on audio, and I'm very much enjoying that. So I'm glad I have a book that is really propulsive, and that one is keeping me going on audio for sure. So I think that's everything that I'm going to talk about here. I did start a print book from the library, but it fits into a theme that I already had planned with books on my shelf for a reading vlog, and I just finished my previous reading project vlog, so that will be out sometime in the next 2 weeks probably. So I think the book that I just picked up from the library is also going to go into going to start a new project vlog. So I think that's all for books for now. From there, I watched some movies this week. I had planned to watch a couple of movies on a theme, and then I watched none of those. Watched some random other movies that did wind up being on a theme, and also our book to movie adaptation. So that was good. The first one that I watched was The Lost Daughter, starring Olivia Colman, and it's an adaptation of an Elena Ferrante novel. And it's very quiet. You're following a woman who's nearly 50 and alone on a beach holiday, basically, where she meets a family who are potentially like organized crime. They're not very nice. They kind of are domineering of the area, and they just keep bumping into each other. So she makes this tense acquaintance with them a bit, where they're both being friendly to each other's face and kind of trying to take advantage of or gain something from one another, I guess, a bit. But there's very little to it. It's a really quiet movie. So in meeting this family, one of the women is really struggling with her young daughter, and Olivia Colman's character is looking at her and seeing this and thinking back on her own experience as a young 20-something mother of two who was also kind of in academia and working in translations and translating written work. And she was trying to build that academic career and not entirely focusing on motherhood, and really finding a conflict there and struggling hard. And so we're watching her really struggle with motherhood as a young woman, as an older woman, seeing that reflected in this other family, and also reflecting on kind of where she went wrong, and processing. And it's a very, very quiet, slow movie, for sure. That's really all about the introspection. And Olivia Colman is very likable as an actress, but her character is not very likable, I would say. But great performances, for sure. And so I liked that one very much, but it was kind of hard to watch. The second that I watched was Elena Knows, which is one I have read, the book written by Claudia Pinheiro. And I loved the book, though I think in both cases, again, we have a very unlikable main character, Elena, whose daughter commits suicide in the church, but Elena is very sure her daughter would not have done so. And so we're following her process to investigate this, basically, and the difficulties because she is disabled and has Parkinson's, and because of one of the conditions that she has, she is stuck looking downward and can't raise her head really, except for very, very slightly after she's taken some medication. So I feel like they sort of changed the time scale because the movie seems to play out over a very long time, like weeks or months. And the book takes place over a much shorter time scale. But I think it effectively captured the heart, for the most part, of Elena as a character and her journey. But I think they really cut out some massive things about how it wrapped up that killed a lot of the emotional impact. So I think it's super valuable for seeing the Elena character, and what a great job this actress did in terms of us not really being able to see her face for a lot of the show, where she is just looking down, where her face is constricted, like she can't do a lot there, and she's not very emotive, and yet this actress really got across Elena as this very stubborn and determined character who just keeps going. So I was a little mixed on this. Definitely the book is better, as they usually are, but I think it was a worthwhile movie to watch. I did really enjoy it. But I really just didn't like either woman in both of these movies, and yet I think that's a great portrayal of who they are. So some very complex themes about people who are not the greatest mothers, who were maybe a little self-absorbed, and they're thinking through processing their paths and reflecting on it in ways they haven't thought about their motherhood in the past before. So yeah, I really enjoyed both of them. I think they're thought-provoking for sure. So those are the things I watched. Onward to my week. I think my week generally was pretty excellent. I managed to have some time off, get a little relaxation, and get a mental break. I also got a ton done. I managed to get my taxes done. That is fantastic. I cleaned and stained my deck, which is kind of a bigger process than I enjoy. Managed to replace a bathroom faucet that I have needed to replace for quite some time. I didn't get any of the general spring cleaning kind of stuff done that I really wanted to, but that's fine. I got a couple minor things, but I can do spring cleaning later. I got new glasses, which is fantastic. That happened so quickly. It was great. I think the last time around, it was like 8 weeks to order them, and this time it took 5 days and they were in. So that's perfect. So I can see better. Yay. I did dye my hair as well. I tried a new color and I don't think I really like it, because the other color, I liked the color, but it was washing out super fast and it was not really covering my grays, which this one maybe is covering my grays a little better, but not completely. So I don't think it's really worthwhile. So I'm gonna have to go back to the other color, or try and hunt for more, but I don't think I really care enough to try and hunt for more. I also ordered a new laptop, which is exciting. That hasn't gotten here yet, so I will be trying that out. So yeah, I accomplished, I think, a lot this week, and I did have some fun, but nothing super overly exciting. Yeah, so that was my week this week. I think a good productive week that I mostly enjoyed. I'm not looking forward to getting back to work fully next week, because I think I was gone for a real hectic week. There's gonna be a ton to catch up on. So that's gonna be my coming week. Yeah, so I think that is all for me for this week. So I will leave you with that and say I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.